Okay, well, welcome to Something to Talk About, and it's sponsored by Fieldstone's Communities of Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers assisted and independent living along with a vibrant memory care community located on the tranquil Rolling Bay campus. They also include day stay and respite care programs. Call 206 594 1010 or email Ashley C at fieldstonecommunities.com. Check out our website at fieldstonecommunities.com or come by for a tour today. And we'd also like to acknowledge that we meet on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water. The Suquamish have lived on the water of the Salish Sea since time immemorial, and we honor them and are learning from their stewardship of these lands and waters. But today, we're going to talk to David Harrison's going to talk to us, who is the founder of the Northwest Policy Center at the University of Washington, and he's going to analyze today's national political landscape. Hi, David.
Hello. Hi, everybody. So, as advertised, today we're going to start with the Supreme Court and all the things that they could say about Donald Trump in the next 3 months or be asked to do by Donald Trump or Jack Smith or someone else. Then we'll spend a minute on what's going to happen in January in the House of Representatives and the Congress that will resolve the need of Volodymyr Zelensky to have some money in Ukraine. And then we'll end up with a little meditation on the New Hampshire primary, which will have happened by the time we next meet. So that should cover us nicely. Don't hesitate to interrupt me, but as you know, I'll stop at the end of each of those 3 segments so you can guide us further. There's a lot of time in American history where the media, free as it is, helps us to understand what's going on in meaningful ways and helps confusion from reigning. Unfortunately, that's never the case when they're talking about the Supreme Court. A cliche in America is, she's going to take that all the way to the, and then the answer is the Supreme Court. But as you know, the Supreme Court hears very few cases, and their significance can sometimes be misunderstood. So we're about to enter a spell when the court decides what to do on the Colorado case about Trump not appearing on the ballot in Colorado. We run the danger of not understanding the significance of several other things that are before the court. There are 4 or 5 things the court will do with regard to Trump in the next 2 months. And obviously, we would like them to do what we deeply wish for them to do in all cases. But of the 4 or 5 separate matters, there are 2 where I think the court very much will not do what one of us might seek. I think it's also important to not get carried away with one of Trump's lawyers said they fought to get Kavanaugh selected and that they have high hopes for him. That's an awful thing to say to about a Supreme Court judge, and I'm sure Kavanaugh doesn't appreciate it. If anything, it would heighten his resolve to not be predictable when it comes to Trump-related legal actions. But you remember that court had absolutely no interest all along in supporting the false claims that the election was rigged. And there'll be an explanation and hopefully a rich understanding of what they would do. But the first thing they won't do is allow a free-for-all on which states put Trump on the ballot. There's been an argument by Lawrence Tribe and Michael Ludwig, who's a conservative jurist, that the court has no choice but to uphold Trump being disallowed at the ballot because of Article 3 of the Constitution, which was Constitution was amended in 1868 to basically not allow insurrectionists to be officers of the United States. And then, as you know, subsequently to the Colorado 5-4 decision, the Maine Secretary of State has argued that he's an insurrectionist and can't be on the ballot in Maine. So the court will have no choice but to resolve this matter. And I think it's pretty clear that they will craft a way to keep states from preventing Donald Trump from being on the ballot for not awful reasons. First, when insurrection was used as a term in 1868, it referred to being a part of a 1 million person army that was wanted to overthrow the United States government. So just because the word insurrection is there doesn't mean the meaning of it extends to Trump's awful actions on January 6th. Secondly, the Congress has never established anything resembling a due process means of determining whether somebody has violated the Third Amendment. And there are some arguments over whether the presidency represents an officer of the United States. So I'm fully convinced that we do not have a path where Trump is not allowed on the ballot. The only thing I would say about it is if a reason to allow Trump on the ballot is that there otherwise would be turmoil, that's crazy, because if something is the Constitution, you got to enforce it. And of course, there would be turmoil if you kept anybody from the ballot. In 1802, 1803, they tried to convict Aaron Burr of treason and for allegedly trying to raise an army in the South to take over the Louisiana Purchase. And he was acquitted, but he had hundreds of thousands of supporters. And you think of the most awful people in United States politics ever since. You can't have the standard be, well, the people wouldn't like it because he's popular. But I don't think that's what Roberts will be looking for. I think he'll get more than 5 votes, but that they will be careful to say something about Trump's show. I think that's what they'll do. I think they will do something that mollifies Sotomayor and Kagan a little bit to make it look like it's not some dreamland in terms of what Trump has done. So the thing to keep in mind is there's multiple other issues in which the court will be involved that are more favorable to us. And one I will underscore in a minute. First, all this gag order stuff from the Brooklyn trial, and there's been a little gag order discussion with regard to Jack Smith. That's just skirmishing. The court isn't going to totally eliminate a presidential candidate's First Amendment rights to speak, but the court will continue to watch over Trump's abuse of judges and court staff and so forth. But that's not going to rise to the level of some extraordinary Supreme Court action on gag orders. There's other things that are happening. You remember E. Jean Carroll, who also has won a defamation suit against Trump. And then there was a subsequent defamation claim after Trump lost the case where he defamed E. Jean Carroll again. So Trump had late in the E. Jean Carroll charges that Trump raped her and then defamed her about her accusing him of rape, Trump raised presidential immunity defense. And at that time, this is different from the other immunity cases. At that time, the federal district court ruled that it was 3 years into the case, and it was too late for him to make that defense. Then the appellate court upheld that finding, and so there's no chance that the Supreme Court's going to look at anything happening with immunity for Donald Trump in the context of E. Jean Carroll. However, there are huge issues coming up with regard to the extent to which a sitting president is immune from civil or criminal action. Two cases notably, there are 7 Capitol police officers still in court for civil damages from Trump over injuries they suffered in January 6th. And so far the rulings so far are that Trump is not immune from those charges, or not automatically immune. All these issues have to do with whether the president, when he does something that's civilly or criminally actionable, is acting within his official duties. So Trump's going to argue first that he's absolutely immune in all ways from all civil and criminal cases. And you would want a president to have some protection, otherwise they'd get sued constantly. So that's the reason that you develop immunity for actions taken under the presidency. What Jack Smith will say is these actions are not actions taken in your official duties. These are actions in violation of your official duties. So Trump is arguing in terms of the Jack Smith charges that he had an official duty to challenge the election results because he thought something was fishy, and that's why Jack Smith has gotten all those people to swear that Trump knew that he was lost, because then it's no longer acting within his official duty. So at any rate, to make a long story short, that's the big case. You wonder why Jack Smith asked the court to make an advance ruling that Trump was not fully immune. It's because Jack Smith, and people are saying, "Oh, Jack Smith, you idiot. We were looking forward to a March trial, and now you're all mired, and the Supreme Court didn't take your request to clarify his level of immunity, and now we're going to an appellate court, DC appellate court next week, next Tuesday, to go be in front of 2 judges appointed by Biden and one by George W. Bush. Jack Smith, why are you doing this? We want to have the trial." Jack Smith wants guidance for how he can best prosecute Trump for felonies. So if the appellate court, or subsequently the Supreme Court, gives additional guidance on the nature of presidential immunity, we really haven't had rulings like that ever since Nixon's claim of executive privilege was denied. So the court has never said that there's an absolute immunity. The appellate court won't say that now. The Supreme Court won't say that. And it's possible that if it's a wise enough definition of limitations on immunity that the DC appellate court provides, that the Supreme Court won't accept further appeal if Trump chooses to file one, and that they'll just let the ruling stand. And that will be because they don't want to have their whole docket be controlled by Trump, and they will already have decided to rule on the Colorado case. And they've decided to rule on another case too, which is a question of what is, I'll go back over these, a question of what represents an official proceeding. 300 people plus Donald Trump have been charged with the felony of obstructing an official proceeding. And the Supreme Court is taking that case filed by 3 people who are in jail for obstructing an official proceeding. That law was Sarbanes-Oxley, which was done after Enron because all people were making illegal misrepresentations that entered the federal record, and they thought they should stop. There were a lot of lies, accounting statements and such. So they finally found one federal judge who said disrupting an official proceeding doesn't mean assaulting a building. It means changing a record, a document, an object. And that went to the appellate level, and the court ruled 2-1, overruled the federal court judge and said that if you assaulted a building when Congress is trying to count electoral votes, that's disruption of an official proceeding. That's what the court's going to rule on between now and June. The public will, the press will make a ton of chatter about that. We're not at any risk with Donald Trump because he's charged by Jack Smith with also defrauding the government and with wrongfully changing the electoral process. So Donald Trump isn't going to go free because he did or did not obstruct an official proceeding. What you would like the court to rule with us, I think it's possible since they took the case, that they'll do a narrow construction of Sarbanes-Oxley, and whoever is in jail just because of that charge will go free. There's 1,000 people who've been arrested, 300 of them for obstructing an official proceeding, but it's not clear from the record how many of them have other charges. So to summarize, Donald Trump and the Supreme Court, they're not going to overturn, they're not going to uphold Colorado. They're going to say we haven't met the Article 3 standard of insurrection, or that we violated due process. They're going to let Trump on the ballot, but they will protect they will not establish complete immunity, and they will protect Jack Smith's efforts to bring Donald Trump to justice. That's the good news. There's not going to be any finding of total immunity. There's no case record that would support that, and that'll be the good news. The question will be whether people will understand that we've got that good news. It will mean, that Trump will be on trial certainly by May, because all these things are expedited. And obviously, a lot of us feel a lot happier when we see him Jack Smith calling Mark Meadows to the stand. Remember, the cool thing about all this, after endless depositions and such, and 10 people turning state's evidence, this isn't a trial where, Adam Schiff is be on the stand or Liz Cheney. This is a trial where the witnesses are going to be the Mark Meadowses and those young women that believe that Trump was an actual president. So that's the Supreme Court. To summarize, we'll be fine with E. Jean Carroll, with police officers suing Trump, with Jack Smith and immunity, and we'll be less fine with obstructing an official proceeding that might be a narrow ruling, which overturns the appellate court, and we're not going to have the Supreme Court shut down Trump on the ballot. Questions, thoughts, and concerns? That is my predictions. If they're betting in Vegas on this, you can make money on those predictions. Please send me your 10% share from your winnings.
I'm just discouraged about the 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the states bringing that forward. That your prediction is that
why are you upheld? Do you really want 50 separate states to make separate decisions on what insurrection means? Seems that's the recipe for insurrection.
Yeah, well, the thing is that it's pretty clear. That is a definition of being able to run for president, like it's your age or being a natural born.
Yeah, you can't be an insurrectionist. You got to be 45 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't be an insurrectionist.
But what does that makes no sense to me, and makes no sense in a logical world that a person who's obviously wanted to steal that election and asked people to come to the Capitol and storm it.
Well,
I have a real difficult time with this because sometimes the Supreme Court goes, yeah, states' rights. Yeah, okay, for gun laws.
Wouldn't you want somebody to be actually convicted or?
Well, yeah, well, they had a trial. In Colorado, they had a trial where they established that it was an insurrection, and so it doesn't need to be by reasonable doubt a criminal thing. I think it's fine to have a civil finding. So, I feel like procedurally, Colorado, that to me has a much stronger case for being upheld than just sort of the decision by the Maine Secretary of State.
At least because it's an earlier stage. I mean, Maine's in an earlier stage, but yeah, it was a serious discussion in Colorado. And remember that, as you would say, it's not like those 5 judges were just randomly casting their doubts on Donald Trump. It's an evidentiary record. What the court's going to rule is this is the furthest thing from trivial in the world, and that if you're going to have a constitutional amendment that forbids an American citizen from running for president, that you've got to meet an evidentiary due process standard. I think if Donald Trump had already been convicted by Jack Smith's court, then it'd be a much closer question. The exciting note is there has only been one person in the country that has ever been denied the right to serve because of that amendment, and that's a county supervisor in New Mexico that was involved in January 6th. He got booted out for having participated in an insurrection. So we already have a record of somebody doing that, just not Donald Trump. Reed,
I read an interesting analysis by Stephen Portnoy on ABC News about the framers' discussions of this the 14th Amendment, third article, going through the idea that the original bill from the House was very narrowly carved to just talk about the Confederate. It was time limited, and it was focused on just people who had participated in the Civil War from the South, and that the Senate picked it up and made it clear that no, they wanted it to be about today and the future. And of course, the other thing is that we decide who gets on ballots in this country, state by state. Messy as that is, there's no way that this could have been brought nationally, except, as you say, by the result. I mean, the Supreme Court can't decide who shows up on the Washington ballot, can they? Unless you're using the result of, say, a conviction by in a federal crime.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there are, I guess I would say this, there are qualifications for office that are set within a state that make somebody eligible for office. And there are in the Constitution, as amended, standards for who can run for president. So I think the standing of the Supreme Court to decide at minimum what states can do relative to constitutional provisions is pretty clear. And so I would, I think we're going to win. I don't think Donald Trump's going to be president, but I do think he will be convicted of felonies and that they will be consequential. But that silver bill we're hoping for, I don't think it's going to happen. But I do revel in the fact that the court will be strong on declining absolute immunity. Trump has made the argument that because he was unsuccessfully, he wasn't convicted in his first and second impeachment, that this would be double jeopardy for him to be charged by Jack Smith. And that impeachment is the recourse for any of these issues about a president. But the court won't buy that because Jack Smith's charges are entirely different than the articles of impeachment. So let's go on to our other two issues. I'm sorry I made you sad. That's just what I think. Making me sad too. I want to mention for a minute Mike Johnson and 60 white rich Republicans walking along the border. That isn't the most pathetic thing I have seen. They want to comfort the comfortable and afflict the afflicted, so they certainly chose the right place to go for that. I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably makes sense that Americans want a relatively secure border. We've had a relatively insecure border for a long time, a long time. And of course, a lot of migration in the West for crop picking and so forth. But somewhere along there, the movement across the border by undocumented people became a number that maybe the average American citizen is uncomfortable with, especially if it's 2.5 million people a year. So the reason why we're hearing about this a lot is with a 2 or 3 vote majority, Mike Johnson has almost no leverage on anything. The only reason he's got leverage on this, where he can get Schumer and Biden to change immigration law, is because we're out of money to give to Volodymyr Zelensky, and not just Biden, but the Congress can't abide Putin eventually ending up in Kyiv. So Zelensky's doing pretty well, and they haven't begun to exhaust every way they can get him help, but they do need this money. And because of that, they're going to agree to something in January that is closest to the bipartisan discussion in the Senate that's involved with James Lankford of Oklahoma and Christian Sinema of Arizona and the Democrat whose name I now remember, Chris Murphy, maybe. So there will be a solution. The reason they were marching along the border was to show they have resolve. The solution can't be a carbon copy of what's in the Senate. Mike Johnson has to have something, little bit of something, but it can't be so much that he won't get 100 votes from Hakeem Jeffries. So we're slicing this very tightly. There'll be more money on the border, and they will change the asylum standard, which is now credible fear or even more likely they'll change the method of what to do with somebody when they seek asylum, because right now um, um, there's 3 million claim backlog in this country, and almost all those folks are in the country, and a huge percentage of them will not have their asylum claims honored. So what Biden was trying to do was set up an appointment system and numbers, and have people seek asylum from where they were, and all that's working, just not nearly at the scale that it would have to work. So for a while, that slowed down the border stuff. So there's going to be a compromise. There'll be more money for the border. There'll be less admitting people who made the asylum claim until their claim is honored. There'll be an attempt to work on the backlog, and there'll be some shitty little mean-spirited thing that Mike Johnson's added that Schumer and Biden will allow because they want to help Zelensky. And the reason why Mike Johnson has to do it is 2/3 of his leadership are with Biden on fighting Putin. So a lot of those committee chairs can't abide not helping Ukraine. So that's why eventually it's going to happen. That's my view. Questions on what's happening over there? Jeffries will, yet again, they can talk all they want about Mike Johnson's 2-vote majority, but there's not a way in the world this is going to happen without a discharge position and a floor vote that gets 100 Republicans. 100 Republicans will vote that they got concessions and improve the border and want to help Zelensky. Not even half of the sitting Republicans, but the 120 or so Democrats that need to pass it will pass it ultimately. And they're depending on Schumer and Biden to give them something that they can vote for. All this stuff walking along the border is still posture. There's still going to be a bill because Mike Johnson does not want to have the fall of Ukraine on his record.
Yeah.
Thoughts about this matter?
Specifically, the money, the additional money that will go to the border, is that for walls or that for troops?
I think they're allergic to anything like an addition to the wall for political reasons. There might be some segment of the wall,
like a photo op.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wouldn't be much, and then I'm sure they're trying to have 0 feet. On the other hand, it's a negotiation.
Right. Be interesting to see what comes of it.
Questions on this?
Can I ask a question?
Remember, right after it is the 2 appropriations bills.
Are you going?
You're on.
So,
Clemenses?
yeah, what's being done to, work with the countries that are, have a government that people want to flee, to, really stop the flow because the people are happy with where they are. I mean, we can build walls, we can, change all these little things, but these are all things like putting bandages on a big wound. I'd like to see the government or some part of this immigration crisis address, the reason why people are coming here, or because a lot of them are fleeing something that's, a place where there's loaded with gangs and they can't make a living and so on. And those are things which, could be addressed. And I don't see any progress on that.
Well, a couple months ago, the vice president went down to Central America and had some meetings. And I don't know what the level of investment is right now, either in security or economic opportunity. It is certainly the case for those of you who have traveled in Central America that these folks are not coming from Costa Rica and Belize. I mean, there's two examples of countries. There are relatively few coming from Panama. So those are three countries that are politically stable, relatively, have elections.
But El
And,
Salvador,
El Salvador.
What
El Salvador, they're
is what?
they're coming from El
All
Salvador.
right, Venezuela, El Salvador, Guatemala. So, as Ed's saying, why don't we invest in that? Well, I think they're coming. Certainly, there are folks with who meet the credible fear standard, and the gangs and so forth. Investing in stable democracies is a tough thing for the United States to figure out just exactly how you would invest in a stable democracy. But you know that a not inconsiderable number of people who are at the border have some credible fear claims that they are undoubtedly expressing with fervor when what America most means to them is economic opportunity. And there just isn't enough going on economically in some of those countries. And here's the bad news. The extent to which you would have to raise the economies of a really poor Central American country to make it a place that there is rich enough opportunity to not want to live in the United States, especially if you have some kind of relatives up here. That's a huge gap. So I think we're an inviting target outside of the asylum issue. For a lot of people, asylum is a way to get here, and we're inviting because people want things for their families and for their children. They want food and shelter, safety, and education. And there are millions of people in this country who got to, and not just Latinos, that got across the border that way and whose families have prospered for generations to come. And you could talk to any amount of Mexican Americans you meet on the island, and the reason, to the extent they're happy to be here, it's all about massive improvements in economic opportunity. So anyway, in long answer, Ed, I think you're right. Those are the things we have to work on, especially on the economic side. The gap is ginormous, and I think that's what my discouraging news is.
Mm.
Other comments, and I will go on to the last. Jacqueline.
I just got a bulletin that the Supreme Court is going to hear the Colorado decision.
Did they say when? Or
Haven't, I didn't read it. I just.
So, yeah. The other thing I didn't say about that is, I think Roberts.
Early February.
February. I think Roberts and Sotomayor and Kagan, even if it takes a minority opinion, will want to say something about Trump's abuses. I don't know how that minority opinion is constructed, but I'd be shocked if they are silent on that, on Trump's role on January 6th. Okay, let's talk about New Hampshire and Iowa for a minute. We got 10 minutes or so left. Nikki Haley didn't forget to say the word slavery. Nikki Haley decided in the middle of a question and answer session to not say the word slavery. Everybody in the world knew the answer was monumentally about slavery. And it says something about her character that she tried to weasel out of that. However, she also took the Confederate flag down from her state capitol, so I'll give her that. So in 2016, right after Trump won, I told you guys this before, my youngest son, who was then 30 or something, 26, said, well, here's the good news about Trump winning. It's going to surface the undercore of America in ways that we've been avoiding forever. So maybe eventually we'll have to deal with this in America in a way we haven't dealt with it. That certainly has done that. So then the night they were over for dinner, and I told him, for my crazy interest in Nikki Haley, he about if he wasn't 38, he would have petitioned the court to remove me as his father. And he said, Dad, there is no meaningful political policy difference between DeSantis, Trump, and Haley. And I'm here to tell you that's just not true. He's a smart person. The difference is Haley's a globalist. If you're Zelensky or a NATO official, you know the difference because it's monumental with regard to international policy. So it turns me back to thinking about why any breathing, speaking Democrat would have a secret hope that Haley does well in New Hampshire. First, early on, before she ran, you could have said about the candidates, well, one candidate is mean-spirited, hateful, anti-constitutional, and the other is Donald Trump, DeSantis and Trump. But of course, that DeSantis has sunk. He started out very close to Trump. He could never figure out a way to say, Haley's done a much better job of veiled references to Trump than DeSantis. DeSantis is so afraid that people who supported Trump would never go for him. So sometime, somewhere, somebody walked into his office and said, Ron, the way to do this is have it be all about where woke, Florida is the place that woke comes to die, which has got to be the stupidest conclusion ever, especially when it includes Mickey and Minnie Mouse. Of course, that's not going to, woke comes to die. You're a druggist in Ashtabula, and you're thinking, God, what does that mean? And who is this jerk? So they should have really said, Ron, get a personality. Start by getting a personality and start by talking to other people like you're not an automaton, and maybe you can be a candidate. But meanwhile, somebody walked into Nikki Haley's office and said, you've got a compelling personal story. Your parents were immigrants. Act like America provided opportunity for you. Have some kind of positive thing to say to that. And act like you don't have indigestion on a daily basis. See if you can crack a smile. Be conservative as you're going to be. Stand up for our role in the international order, and don't sell Zelensky down the river, and don't make complimentary statements about Putin, and don't do things like that, and also be younger than all of the other candidates.
Yes.
And that's what she's done. So it is true that if we had Gretchen Whitmer and Gavin Newsom and other people in a race for who was nominating, I would not speak one positive word about Nikki Haley. We are running an 81-year-old man who could fall over and hit his head in August and give the presidency to Donald Trump. This is a serious matter. Therefore, I am unapologetic by in hoping that Nikki Haley will finish second in Iowa, passing DeSantis. Not necessary, but necessarily come within 10 points of winning in New Hampshire. The press is so hungry for a story that if she gets 30 and Trump gets 40 in New Hampshire, we'll have a story. Might be closer. Lately, the polls are looking pretty good, but those polls are all over the place. So you're hoping that on January 23rd, I'm hoping that the news is that we have a race. That whether or not Trump does great things on Super Tuesday or something, you're looking to see what might happen if Trump is running on inevitability and invulnerability. So you always wonder what happens when there's any news that that somebody's in trouble. You wonder how solid ongoing support is. And the fact that he's now attacking Haley in New Hampshire is a good sign that he's worried about his margins. So that's why I think that way. I understand that she'd be the most conservative president in the last 80 years, but she's my safety belt on this ride. And I was hoping Dean Stevens would be, but is not going to be. So she's my safety belt, and I'm not. And she's read the Constitution. She wouldn't be involved in an insurrection, and therefore I don't have any apologies. So meditations on Iowa and New Hampshire. I think it goes Trump, DeSantis, Haley. In Iowa, I think it goes Trump by 6 points or so over Haley, and then Christie in New Hampshire. I think Christie's got to decide what to do. The votes he's getting in New Hampshire would have been meaningful for Haley. On the other hand, no one attacks Trump like Christie, so you got to respect that. I wouldn't buy that DeSantis's votes will all go to Trump. 60% of Republicans say they're willing to consider other candidates, so I believe that. Final comments, questions, insults, thoughts, concerns with regard to New Hampshire and Iowa?
I just think it's crazy that Iowa and New Hampshire are the first primaries. And I know that's tradition, but there's such.
Well, we switched to a state.
Yeah,
that's not going to have any impact on the general election. Biden's president because of South Carolina, and we lost that presidential race by 30 points.
Yeah, I know. So, these we get the media really gets, the Iowa, they have all their cameras down there on it, but really those two elections, primary elections, are really not that important.
Did Barack Obama win in Iowa? I don't think so.
No.
Michelle Bachmann won one year, didn't she?
Yeah, I think so. But they're just, it's so funny how we as a country put so much energy into those two tiny states.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to look back and see who got a.
Yeah.
I know, Clinton lost, Bill Clinton lost, and then got closer in New Hampshire and labeled himself the comeback kid. And it's all a blur now.
Yeah.
I'm not fleeing the country yet, but I got grandchildren on Bainbridge Island. We got to stay here.
Yeah.
When you flee, you had best send out a memo.
On where we
We want to know.
For a visit.
That's right.
Good to see you, folks.
Thanks so much.
Good to see you. Yeah. Thank you so much.